Hello, my friend. Today we begin a journey into one of the most unforgettable moments in human history, a story of dreams, courage, tragedy, and hope. But before we reach the great ship itself, let me take you to a quiet street in Belfast, where a young boy named Thomas Andrews Jr. once stood with wide eyes and a heart full of wonder. Thomas grew up surrounded by sounds of hammers, steel, engines, and the voices of hard-working men who built ships for the world. Every day, he would watch them shape massive metal plates, lift beams into the sky, and slowly bring giant vessels to life. And every night, he imagined building a ship so strong, so magnificent, that the whole world would stop and stare. He didn't know it then. But one day, he would help create a ship that people would remember forever. The Titanic. The dream of a ship that could not sink. Years passed, and Thomas became a brilliant shipbuilder, calm, kind, and loved by everyone. When his company decided to build the largest, most luxurious ship in history, Thomas was chosen as the chief designer. He wanted the ship to be elegant, but he also wanted it to be safe. He added watertight compartments, huge sections that could be sealed if water entered the ship. He suggested carrying more lifeboats. Many of his ideas were ignored, but he continued working with pride because he believed in building something beautiful for the world. At the same time, another man was dreaming, Captain Edward Smith. Tall, respected, and known for his steady leadership, he had sailed for more than 40 years. Titanic would be his final voyage before retirement, and he wanted this journey to be perfect. And so, two dreams, one of design, one of leadership, came together to create what people called the unsinkable ship. April 10th, 1912. The voyage begins. Southampton, England was alive with excitement. People filled the docks, shouting, waving, laughing, crying. Everyone wanted to see the grand ship that shone like a floating palace. The Titanic. She was enormous. She was elegant. She was a symbol of human achievement. Passengers came from many different worlds. There were wealthy travelers dressed in diamonds and silk, people who came to enjoy the luxury of fine dining, warm baths, grand staircases, and music that filled the night air. There were immigrants, humble families carrying hope in small suitcases. They dreamed of a better life in America, a life where they could work hard and build something new. There were workers, musicians, cooks, and crew members who kept the ship alive every single hour. And then there was Jack Dawson. Jack Dawson, a young man with a dream. Jack was not rich. He was a simple, free-spirited young artist who had won his ticket in a card game. But he didn't care how he got on the ship, only that he did. For Jack, the Titanic was not just a ship. It was an opportunity to dream, to travel, to start again. He walked around the decks with curiosity in his eyes, sketchbook in his hands. He drew faces, places, the sea, the sky, everything that made life beautiful. He felt alive, and he had no idea that his journey would become part of history itself. A floating world of light and music. As Titanic sailed into the open ocean, passengers felt like they were living inside a dream. Each night, music echoed from the ship's grand halls. The dining rooms glowed with warm light. People danced, laughed, and tasted foods they had never experienced before. On the upper decks, wealthy travelers talked about business, money, and society. On the lower decks, families sang songs, shared stories, and played simple games with their children. Different lives, different dreams, all connected by one ship cutting through the dark water of the Atlantic. But beneath the joy, something quiet and deadly waited on the horizon. Something made of ice. The night of the iceberg. It was April 14th, 1912. A clear, calm, moonless night. The sea looked like black glass. The air felt sharp and cold. Some officers whispered, "This is dangerous water." Titanic received several warnings from other ships. "Ice ahead. Be careful. Slow down." But the ship continued at high speed. Some believed the Titanic was too strong to be harmed. Others wanted to break a record for the fastest crossing. Meanwhile, Jack Dawson stood on the deck, staring at the stars. Their brightness filled him with peace. But as he breathed the freezing air, he felt something strange. A sense of stillness. A sense that the ocean was hiding a secret. At exactly 11:40 p.m., a sailor in the lookout tower rang the warning bell. "Iceberg, right ahead." The word struck the ship like thunder. The collision. The Titanic turned sharply, but the iceberg was too close. The ship scraped against the ice, a long, cold, jagged tear that cut into its side. The sound was not loud. It was soft, almost gentle, but deadly. Thomas Andrews was one of the first to inspect the damage. He moved quickly through the lower decks, his face growing pale with every step. Finally, he whispered the truth no one wanted to hear. "The ship will sink. Not in an hour, not in 5 hours, but certainly." And there were not enough lifeboats. The beginning of panic. At first, many passengers didn't believe the danger. The Titanic felt steady. The music still played. The electric lights still shone. But then, the ship started to tilt. Water began to rush through the lower compartments. Doors jammed, hallways filled. Crew members shouted instructions. Some people froze in fear, unable to speak. Captain Smith stayed calm and strong. His orders were clear. Women and children first. "Load the lifeboats. Keep order." The crew worked fast, but time was running out. Jack Dawson helped families find the lifeboats. He lifted children into boats, guided older passengers, and shouted for people to stay calm. Even in fear, he showed courage. Heroes in the dark. Across the ship, countless quiet heroes stood up. The musicians, led by Wallace Hartley, gathered on the deck and began to play calming music. Their hands were shaking from the cold, but they continued until the very end, giving peace to everyone around them. Thomas Andrews went from deck to deck, urging people to wear life jackets, helping them find the boats. He refused to save himself. He believed his duty was to the ship and its passengers. There were firemen, cooks, and crew members who worked until the water reached their waists. And still, they stayed. These were the moments when humanity shone brightest. Not in luxury, but in kindness. The final moments. By 2 a.m., the bow, the front of the ship, was deep underwater. The stern, the back, began to rise painfully into the icy air. People screamed. People prayed. People held on to each other with trembling hands. Jack Dawson stood near the rail, watching the lifeboats drift away into the dark. Only a few spaces remained. He helped one last child into a boat. He smiled at the little boy, even though his own heart was breaking. Captain Smith walked into the wheelhouse alone. The musicians played their final note. The great lights of the Titanic flickered once, then went out. And then, in one enormous, heartbreaking roar, the ship split apart and disappeared beneath the ocean. The silence that followed was colder than the water itself. The aftermath. More than 1,500 lives were lost that night. Only a small number survived in the lifeboats, drifting in darkness, whispering prayers for help. Hours later, the rescue ship Carpathia arrived and pulled the survivors aboard. People cried as they were lifted from the lifeboats. Tears of sorrow, tears of relief, tears of disbelief. Among the survivors were children, mothers, and a few brave men. But many, like Jack Dawson, Thomas Andrews, and Captain Smith, were gone forever. Yet the world would remember them, not just for how they died, but for how they lived. How they showed courage, kindness, love, and selflessness, even in the worst moments. The legacy of the Titanic. The sinking of the Titanic changed the world. New safety laws were created. Ships carried enough lifeboats for everyone. Radio communication improved. People learned that no ship, no matter how large or powerful, was stronger than nature. But more importantly, people learned about compassion. They learned that in the darkest night, humanity can shine with extraordinary light. Today, the Titanic lies deep beneath the sea, silent, untouched, resting in the cold darkness of the Atlantic. But its story lives on, in museums, in books, in films, in the hearts of millions who still feel connected to the people who sailed on that journey. And now, my friend, you are part of its story too. You have traveled with Jack, Andrews, and Captain Smith. You have sailed on the world's most famous ship. You have seen courage, beauty, and tragedy all through the power of English storytelling.